Yes, people, Ricky here from Behind the Bars TV. Hope everybody's fit and well. I'll just start by saying thanks to all my subscribers. I'm currently at 12,000. I've getting in the last 2 weeks, it's increased by 2,000. So it's going up at a good rate. So I must be doing something right. So thanks for all your continuing support, people. But in this episode, I'm going to talk about ex gangster, now paedophile, Dominic Noonan. The reason why I'm speaking about Dominic Noonan is because he's recently just been in the news again in the Greater Manchester News. And I was also in Franklin with Dominic. So I'll just talk a little bit about what I know or what I knew of the Noonans, because everyone will probably have heard of them up and down the country. Yeah. Because I remember when I was a teenager, before I even went to prison, I used to watch them documentaries, McIntyre's. Used to hear about all the different gangsters, because he used to do, he'd done a lot of the gangsters up and down the country. Dominic's, I can't remember the program, Dominic Noonan Underworld, something mad like that. But I remember seeing the documentary about the Noonans, and they did have a bit of a name for themselves, had a fearsome reputation. And when I first went into prison, when I went into Castleton, Dominic and his code Ds had been caught with a gun up in the northeast somewhere. And his code D was up in Castleton when I was there. I remember speaking to him. I think he was called Walshy. He was a canny lad. Didn't get around trying big himself up, saying, I'm one of Noonan's pals and all that. He just got on with the rest of the lad. He was a likeable lad. Not sure what he got up to after that or what he's doing now, but that was my first encounter of someone like connected to the Noonans. And then obviously when I turned a bit older and I got moved to the adults prison and I got moved into HMP Franklin, I was on F wing. Dominic was over on G wing. The only time I seen him down the gym a few times. I seen him down healthcare, and he just seemed to get on with everyone. There was no animosity. There was people used to say behind his back, he's a nonce, different things. So they were saying this type of things back then. And I remember when we were down healthcare, you had two separate rooms where you could just go and choose which room you want to go and sit in case one gets overloaded. So Dominic was actually sitting in this other room with a lad that was on our wing, who was on F wing. Just a skinny lad, looked like a vulnerable type, skinny, quiet. He didn't look like your normal jail type. I can't remember exactly what he was in for. But I remember when my pal was down there, he went to go in the same room as them two, and Dominic was sitting side by side with him, and he jumped up and shut the door so no one could come in, and they all went in the other room, and everyone was sitting in the room talking about him then, saying, lately, see what he's doing in there. Like he's fucking more or less grooming him in the room. But obviously, like I said, that was my first encounters with Noonan in there. But I'll just talk a little bit about what's been going on, what's in the news and all that. And I'll just tell you a little bit about his background just off what I'm reading up on here. I took a few notes on what I put on Wikipedia and on the different news channels. But for years, Dominic Noonan traded on his gangland reputation, confident his notoriety would help conceal his dark secrets. But his infamy wasn't enough to stop the rumours swirling around Manchester's criminal underworld. Police, fellow villains, and even, it was said, members of his own family had long suspected Noonan was a predatory sex offender with a predilection for young boys, but his sickening crimes had never been proved in a court of law. That was until May 2018, when the gangsters past finally caught up with him. The then 53-year-old was found guilty of 13 historical sex offences against 4 young boys, aged as young as 10. Already serving an 11-year sentence for arson, blackmail and perverting the course of justice, Noonan was given a separate 11-year sentence, which meant he would spend the majority of his adult life behind bars. Noonan was back in the headlines recently when a former detective alleged police watched as a young boy walked into a house with a suspected paedophile under surveillance. Former Great Manchester Police Detective Rick Mortimer told an employment tribunal that the man was believed to be dangerous and abusing youngsters after getting them drunk, but alleged that when he suggested that police intervene to protect the boy, his superior officer said, "We can't see, we don't know about it. What we can't see, we don't know about." The target of the surveillance operation wasn't named at the hearing, but it is understood to be Noonan. Born to Irish parents and raised in Whalley Range, as one of 14 siblings whose first names all began with the letter D, supposedly for Dublin, Noonan rose to notoriety alongside his brothers Damien and Desi by initially specialising in armed robbery. So what they're basically saying there is the coppers had him under surveillance, and they believed that he was a paedophile, and they seen a young boy going into his house, but they're trying to say they couldn't intervene because what we can't see, we don't know about. Surely, just because he's a gangster and he had that reputation, if it wasn't Noonan and they had some other paedophile under surveillance and a young boy went in the house, you'd think they would just sit outside and just wait it out. But no, they wanted to catch him on these other things. But I just think, obviously they had him under surveillance for other criminality, for being a gangster and stuff. But if they suspected he was a paedophile and they actually sat and watched a young boy going into his house knowing what could be happening, surely they should have had a duty of care to intervene to help that youngster, never mind the investigation that was ongoing. That's just my thoughts on that. But as the acid house saw Manchester become one of the clubbing capitals of the world in the late 80s and early 90s, the astute brothers changed tack, realising there was an easier way to rake in the cash. They took over the doors of the city's nightclubs, controlling who could sell drugs in them. A huge imposing presence, Desi was the enforcer and hitman, while Dominic was the cunning and charismatic entrepreneur. But it was Damien, described by journalist Donald McIntyre as the UN peacekeeper in gangland Manchester, who was the level-headed leader of the family. A canny operator, he cemented loyalties by making donations to different causes in his community. The hacienda on Whitworth Street would become their golden goose, running the doors and taking a cut from drug profits. Cuts from drug profits. They meant they were making up to 50 grand a night. A 2018 Channel 5 documentary about the brothers claimed that's what they were making. But their empire was nearly brought down after the murder of White Tony Johnson, the leader of the Cheetham Hill gang, who was gunned down in the car park of the Penny Plaque pub in 1991. It had been alleged that Johnson was killed after a fallout over £350,000. The proceeds from a robbery were divided up. Desi went on trial for his murder. The first trial collapsed amid rumours of the jury tampering, and at the second, Desi was acquitted. With Johnson gone, the Noonans' position was strengthened and they expanded their operations to other cities. Despite increased police surveillance of their activities, an attempt to take over the doors at the hacienda by another gang from South Manchester was brutally suppressed. Dominic, who was sprung from a prison van at traffic lights on the A6 in Pendleton, called at the rival gang's local pub and used a machete to decapitate one of their dogs that was outside. He walked into the pub and placed the head on a pool table in an unambiguous message to anyone thinking of muscling in on their patch. But after making a fortune from robbery, guns, drugs, and ruthless violence, the brothers suffered a swift fall. In the space of just 8 months, the empire, which had taken years to build up, began to crumble. In 2004, Damien was killed aged 37 in a motorcycle accident while on holiday in the Dominican Republic. Then Desi, by this point an alcoholic crack addict, was stabbed to death by a crack dealer known as Yordi Derrick in Chorlton in March 2005. Desi's funeral had all the pomp of a gangland don, but it was almost a last gasp of their power. Speaking in 2018, big fat gypsy wedding star Paddy Doherty, a friend of Damien, said, "The minute Damien died, they weren't half as powerful as I thought they were. He was the gangster of gangsters in Manchester." So I've seen the documentaries and that before, and obviously Desi and Damien were the top dogs, obviously, out of the Noonans. Damien was obviously the enforcer who could have a good old scrap, and Desi which I seen on the prior documentary was a bit of a lunatic and a hot-headed. But Dominic was badly hit by the deaths, and with his brothers gone, he was no longer the force he was. But for years, he was still able to exert influence and still had enough of a reputation to be confident rumours of his sexual abuse would never see the light. By way of sticking two fingers up the authorities, he changed his name to Dominic Lately. But again, if any of you have seen the documentary McIntyre's, you'll know all this. And I remember, like I say, fucking 17 years ago when I seen this, maybe even 18, 19 years ago, Lately, a fat foy, stood for look after those that look after you and fuck off those that fuck off you. In 2005, he was jailed for 9.5 years after a revolver and ammunition were found under the bonnet of his Jaguar when police stopped him in the northeast. He was described by the judge who jailed him then as a very dangerous man. So that was the time when he got sentenced for that, and he went into Franklin, obviously because it happened up here in the northeast. He got sentenced up here. The young'un went to Cassington where I met him, and then Dominic went into Franklin. That's when obviously I met him. He was freed on license in 2010 and claimed to have found God. Kissed the Bible when swearing the oath during his trial, but he continued to be a menace as far as the police were concerned. He started a number of dubious businesses and even had a crack at stand-up comedy. He took great delight in winding up the coppers, even setting up a company called GMP, Greater Manchester Postal. Fucking hell. He was recalled to prison almost immediately after being accused of going berserk at a woman motorist who beeped at him as he crossed a Gorton road. He's said to have tapped the car with a copy of the Manchester Evening News, which featured a story about his release, and shouted, "Do you know who I am?" In 2011, he was accused of raping a woman in a hotel room after celebrating his birthday, but prosecutors dropped the case. So he's alleged to have raped a woman in 2011, but with his past, it's probably likely that he actually did do it. That same year, he was recalled to prison, suspected of being a ringleader during the summer's riots in Manchester. But everyone will remember the Manchester riots when they were looting all the shops and smashing all the streets up. I think that was they were protesting against the lad that got shot dead. I can't remember his name. Got shot dead off the coppers, and I think that's why they were rioting. But at the height of the disorder, he was captured on video talking to a looter who was carrying a large flat-screen TV on Oldham Street. For a man out of jail on licence who could have been recalled to prison for the slightest whiff of trouble, it was reckless. Supposedly, that's what they said. But he enjoyed playing cat and mouse with the law. Prison authorities struggled to cope with him. Some prisoners' govers just didn't want him. Obviously, they didn't want him in the prison because of his reputation. I'm sure he was involved with the Strange riots as well back in the day. I'll have to find out about that and have a look. But they knew that he would either cause trouble or incite others into cause. At one stage, he was housed in the Special Intervention Unit for Troublesome Prisoners at Strangeways. So that's the unit in Strangeways. I think it's the Katia unit. And it says he was on the unit with Kieran Stapleton, nicknamed Psycho, a member of the Salford gear crew. But in 2013, he was cleared of child rape charges after court heard his accuser had a history of making false complaints. He had been accused of molesting the boy of 15 in a flat in Bloom Street in Manchester city centre. While out of prison on licence in summer of 2014, Noonan brought Manchester city centre to a standstill by climbing 100 foot over the big wheel in Piccadilly Gardens in protest at the latest efforts to get him recalled to prison. As more than 1,000 people gathered to watch the 6-hour-long standoff, roads were closed, buses were diverted, business had to shut, losing an estimated 10 grand in trade. Many cheered him on, but despite his reputation, shouts of nonce were also heard from the crowd. So all the crowd that's down there watching him, obviously seeing what's going on, some of them's cheering him on, but obviously some of them will have heard what's going around and heard he's a nonce, so that some of them shouting nonce. But for that, he eventually claimed down. Police charged him with causing public nuisance, but it was later thrown out by the judge who said the wrong charge had been laid and he suspected it had only been done because this offence carried a stiffer sentence than the alternative aggravated trespass. In 2016, he was found guilty of engaging in a sex act in front of a minor. Although he was convicted of perverting the course of justice by offering £5,000 to the boy's family to get the charge dropped, the prosecution alleged that the boy covered his face with a poster as a vulnerable adult man, was intimidated into performing a sex act on Noonan in a bedroom. So he's been done for this. He's up in court. He's offering £5,000 to the family to try and get the case chucked out. But then finally Noonan would face justice for his victims, and even on those close to him, it had been a long time coming. Speaking at the time of his friends, his right-hand man for many years told the Manchester Evening News, Noonan deserves everything he gets. So one of Noonan's boys, I wonder if it's a kid I was up in Cassington with. Anyone from down in Manchester that knows a lot more about me than this, obviously I'm just reading up on stuff and hearing off different things. But let us know what your thoughts are on see what your thoughts are on this. But he said, I remember this lad, he was 13. Noonan was waiting for him to come home from school. This lad sat on his knee and was told to call him Uncle Dom. He give the lad a fiver, give it him in 50p pieces to some of the lads. He bought them cornets of ice cream from the ice cream van. And this is what he supposedly said. The youngster, well, I'm saying the youngster, Dominic's right-hand man. I remember another lad was 14 and Dom said to call him dad and he would be kissing him. I told him he shouldn't be doing that. I just felt very uncomfortable. Him kissing lads who were 13 and 14, staring him in the face. So obviously that was his downfall. Well, his downfall was doing what he'd done, but this was his downfall, actually getting caught for it and the victims coming forward and speaking up. Even his ex-boys that were stood by him all that time. But I just thought I would bring that to light because obviously I've been inside with Dominic. Obviously, if things were different and he didn't go down that route, the story would have been different. It would have been about him being a big-time gangster in Manchester. But if his brothers were still alive now, Desi and Dominic, they'd be fucking totally ashamed. They'd probably castrate them themselves. But I'll leave that one there for now, people. But if you're enjoying the content, remember to like and subscribe. But there's plenty of more to come. There's loads of podcasts coming up I'm doing with the ex-criminals or people that's been to prison. But if you want to appear on my show, give us a shout. My email's in the about section at rickycolleen@gmail.com. If you want to come on and tell some stories, let us know. Get in touch. But take care, people. Enjoy the rest of your day.